I guess this may sound silly, but how do they manage that?
How do they manage what?
In there, in the glass case.
Oh, well, I couldn't say exactly. I know they use magnifying glasses, little tiny tools, single hair brushes, things like that. But mostly they keep at the job until they get things right.
But how do they get the girl to move? Transistors?
How's that?
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Pwn, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host Fred.
Hello.
How you doing this week, Fred?
I'm good. I'm coming through loud and clear. I can hear you on your Bluetooth headset. Listeners, it was revealed to me that John is the proud owner of a Bluetooth headset. I just thought we should get that out there.
Yeah, I never pictured myself as a person who would wear a Bluetooth headset, when the craze first caught on.
Sure, the craze.
But as a parent and as a person who listens to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts, it's nice to have my hands free and no wires dangling around for anyone to choke on. So it's a very functional, if quite douchebaggy accessory.
I like how you turned that around and like me mocking you for your Bluetooth headset.
Yeah,
I guess you want my child to choke. Is that it, Fred?
I mean, if that's what you want, I could try it, but...
Yeah. You know what's funny about things like that, and the same thing with like e-cigarettes, they're like things from the future that kind of make you look like a douchebag. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I had kind of a weird week. I met up with a friend of mine who I hadn't seen since high school, and it was like a nice little hang time, and then somehow the subject turned to 9/11, and I found out he's a 9/11 truther. It's really weird. Do you have any of these in your life? Or
I don't think they listen to the podcast,
Okay.
But there are people that are close to me that are open to new ideas in ways that I'm not.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too deep into this rabbit hole on the podcast.
Okay,
but
all right.
We can share comments and thoughts offline.
I can't wait to hear about it after we stop pressing record. But right now, the little red light is on, and we're doing an episode from the beloved fourth season.
This is an episode of the Twilight Zone known as Miniature. It was a fourth season episode, the 110th of the production run. It aired originally on February 21st, 1963.
For the average person, a museum is a place of knowledge, a place of beauty and truth and wonder. Some people come to study, others to contemplate, others to look for the sheer joy of looking. Charlie Parks has his own reasons. He comes to the museum to get away from the world. It isn't really the 60-cent cafeteria meal that has drawn him here every day. It's the fact that here in these strange, cool halls, he can be alone for a little while. Really and truly alone. Anyway, that's how it was before he got lost and wandered in to the Twilight Zone.
And Serling had me sweating there because I realized the whole time I forgot to do the inflation calculation on 60-cent meals. I know our listeners are going to be hugely let down by that.
I'm in an even worse spot, because did he say the character's name is Charlie Parks?
Yeah, I was wondering, is that like a lame version of Charlie Parker or something? Or?
This kind of blows my Serling intro. I thought the character's name was Charlie Parker. Oh, crap. Let's get through it.
Okay. We like to do, we have to do our own Serling-style intros. John's should be interesting this week, because it was based off a misunderstanding of the main character's name. But let's just hear it.
Long before he took the New York City jazz scene by storm with his innovative bebop style, Charlie Yardbird Parker was a simple, quiet, seemingly white man working a modest, middle American, middle management, middle class, middle and nowhere going gig, you dig? What the soon-to-be heppest of hepcats didn't know was that what he needed most to give his jazzy juices a jolt was the love of a good woman. A good small wooden woman. Tonight we trace the history of the world's most famous saxophone star as we take you behind the Twilight Zone.
Nice. I think
if his name
still
were
works.
Charlie Parker, that would be somewhat clever.
I think it still works because he probably just it's like a nickname. You know what I mean? It's like Cannonball Adderley's real name is probably not Cannonball.
Parks was probably just his clever nickname that his boss used to refer to.
It's like how Miles Davis was originally called Matt Davies.
Exactly.
See if I can get through mine here. To the average person, a museum is a place of knowledge, beauty, and field trips. To Charles Parks, it is a place of ogling, love, and ogling. Like many men, the most meaningful relationship with a woman in his life is through a glass screen. However, as opposed to a healthy obsession with an ex's Facebook page or an all-consuming crush on a cafepress.com t-shirt model, Parks has parked his affection squarely on the shoulders of Little Miss Miniature, a wooden doll. Yes, what you might call a museum, Parks calls a sanctuary. And what Parks calls a sanctuary, his sister calls an obsession. And what his sister calls an obsession, his mother calls a shame. And what his mother calls a shame, I call the 4th season of the Twilight Zone.
Nice.
Yeah, tied it up at the end there.
Yep.
So, as we've said probably 20 times, this is the 4th season episode of The Twilight Zone, which means it's an hour long, and also means that you can't watch it on Netflix for some reason. Still haven't figured out why.
You know, I read some stuff on the internet. I was looking around the Twilight Zone
Tell me
subreddit.
more.
And apparently the speculation, I don't think there's a definitive answer to this, but the speculation is that the 4th season episodes were never part of the original syndication package that was sold to networks because all the other episodes were half hour. The producers didn't want to try and chop up an hour-long episode into 2 episodes. It would have just been a hassle, and they had enough episodes to syndicate without it at all. So the theory is that the Netflix deals are all based around the original syndication packages that CBS had already made. So that's possibly why we're not getting them.
That's the word on the dark net, anyway.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing the hacking to bring that out. Yeah. So you can watch it, however, on Hulu, which has done their homework and licensed the 4th season. If you want to avoid spoilers, I would recommend pressing pause on the podcast and going to watch it now, because we're about to spoil each and every aspect of it as we jump into the plot. Okay, it starts in an office, very clearly the same office from I Dream of Jeannie, which really put me on edge. Like, I kept expecting someone to just jump out and sexually harass somebody else. Like, it's a very uncomfortable place. We see Charlie, our protagonist, sort of a mild-mannered office drone engaged in some, good early 60s vague business. He's working into the lunch hour, which the other fellas in the office don't like too much.
Son of a bitch doing his job.
I understand the phenomenon of one guy being a gunner and working too hard, but
Sure.
It's like he was working like 2 minutes into his lunch hour or something like that. If that's all it takes to make them look bad, I don't know.
Well, it's like a charming juxtaposition with America today,
That's true,
where
yeah.
everyone works like 55-hour weeks bare minimum, and like if you don't take work home with you, you're a complete slacker. There it's like he didn't have the 3rd martini at lunch.
Yeah.
I guess he's a bit uptight.
Yeah. No, I know. On his lunch break, Charlie ends up going to the county museum. It's kind of hard to figure out exactly what kind of museum it was, because like when he walks in, there's like a biology room, and then there's like marble busts and an African art. It's kind of like a smash up of the Natural History Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, kind of in one county building.
Right. Well, you've got like the national level museums that are obviously in DC, and then a good old state museum is going to be tip top.
Yeah.
The individual counties aren't all at the same level,
I mean, I've actually been to probably what you would call a county museum, and what it usually is like a dusty case with some old like arrowheads in it, pretty much. Right. It's pretty much like a corner wing of the
like
DMV,
a roadside
or
attraction
yeah,
with
exactly.
like that one room that's all tilted to like a 45-degree angle. You walk.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, most county museums are sort of on that level, but this is like it's like the Hermitage or something like that. It's pretty impressive. Anyway, Charlie wanders through the exhibits.
He passes all the murderers row.
Yes, right, exactly, as every museum has. And he ends up in some sort of, I guess, Victorian room. And he sees a sick-ass dollhouse, well above and beyond Barbie's dream house. And he peers in. Surprise, surprise, one of the dolls starts playing the harpsichord. So that's surprising, right? Then we get Serling's intro. He's in the museum's display on null space. Sorry. I just
a heady joke.
yeah, that's all. maybe one for the heads.
Oh man, it just occurred to me. How did I not work 12-inch pianist into my Serling intro somehow? God.
Regrets.
I've had a few.
Maybe we can fix it in post or something. Yeah, so when we get back from commercial, Charlie is talking to a museum guard, and he's asking how they got the doll to move and play music. You played the clip at the beginning, and the explanation he gives is it transistors or something? I feel like that's like almost like a weird trope of sci-fi or fantasy when like a character encounters like something that can't be and assumes it's technology and says, is it blank, blank, blank? And I feel like throughout the years, like that blank, blank, blank thing is different. Am I making any sense whatsoever? Like in the early 60s, they'd say, is it transistors? Whereas now they'd be like, is it bitcoins or something? You know what I mean? Like there's like some...
Yeah, I kind of hear what you're saying.
There's like a technology that's vaguely understood, you know?
Right.
The guard says... What are you talking about, buddy? That doll there is made out of wood. Charlie can't quite believe it, but thankfully there's a sign that basically just says, that doll is made out of wood.
Yeah, that part struck a little off to me.
Yeah. The sign says that the house is a model of a Boston townhouse from the 19th century. And it's the house of a particular couple, and the doll is supposed to represent their daughter. And the doll was carved out of a block of wood taken from the balcony on the original house. It like reeks of voodoo to me on some level. It's like, we're going to make a picture perfect replica of our house and make a version of our daughter out of the wood from our house. It's like, what?
Notice the splinters in her eyes.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah, what did you think of the effect of the dollhouse?
I thought it was good. It was very well done.
Well, it's kind of interesting to describe to the listener. You got your dollhouse set up, and so he can see into several rooms at the same time.
Yeah.
And as far as I could tell, I'm just guessing on this, maybe Graham's discussed it. It seems like they had like 4 projectors set up, and so you were projecting like the image, and so one of them is clearly in motion.
Yeah.
Like he's looking at film projected on a small screen. Is that basically what was happening?
Graham's doesn't exactly explain the effect. I assumed it was some sort of like, I guess they didn't really have chroma key then, did they? Or did they have some primitive version of blue screen?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Damn, they've got us stumped. It is impressive, I think. Like,
I know it was the dollhouse. That's what they're going for, but it kind of did look like they had, the equivalent of 4 televisions set right next to each other. So then it kind of started looking like an 80s ad exec's office.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's watching like, I guess whatever CNN was in the 80s, but yeah.
Right.
I mean, I guess the main point is that it's not an actual dollhouse. It's like footage of, real rooms that have been shrunken down.
Yeah, they were wise to not linger on it and then to just cut, quote unquote, inside the dollhouse. And then at that point, they're on like, wide, long shots of the room.
Yeah, totally. Right now, we got to get back to Charlie's office where he's 5 minutes late. So he gets a note that he has to go to the principal's office to see his boss.
Right.
And it's the guy from Will the Real Martian Stand Up? He's in like 1 million episodes.
He's done a couple, and I don't know. I kind of had this reaction where he's so iconic in that episode, it's kind of hard for me to deal with him in other episodes.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of it, and I felt like it would be like if they had the Gremlin playing Henry J. Fate or something. It's just
be a little weird. Yeah. Yeah, or he gets called into his boss's office and it's just like the devil bobblehead doll from Nick of Time.
Right.
You're fired.
Right. The Canimate is Santa Claus in Night of the Meek. It's just, you can't mix these really iconic aliens.
If you've been made into an action figure, you can't play another role, I think is a good rule of thumb.
That's the limit, right.
But it is that dude, and he's giving Charlie quite the talking to for being 30 seconds late. By the way, did you notice this little bit of set dressing in the background? You can see like a sales chart, and did you notice that it was like pointed straight down?
Yeah, I noticed things are not looking good at Business Inc.
Yes. At Office Core. Yeah,
right. I actually wondered, because you said the main set was from I Dream of Jeannie. This office reminded me a lot of The Printer's Devil. I wondered if that was from The Printer's Devil. Like, there's something about the separated glass office that looked familiar. But
it's possible that they dressed it for Printer's Devil. I'm really confident it's I Dream of Jeannie set though, because the desks just look exactly the same. We'll have to go to the tape, as we often have to. But Printer's Devil, maybe it's farther in the distance in my memory.
Yeah, but it might be more likely that they'd shared space since they were both fourth-season episodes.
Yeah, I thought you were like, they both shared space since they were both like small startups, like The Paper and This Office, you know. They had a WeWork that they shared together. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so the boss is chewing Charlie out, and he's explaining that Charlie doesn't really... He's not a culture fit, exactly, for this particular venture capital firm. Things go south pretty quick. He really, like, just escalates to you're fired from you're 5 minutes late, like, in the span of about 30 seconds.
His basis for firing him is because Charlie doesn't seem to like his coworkers enough.
Yeah.
Which is a very... Yeah, he asked him, do you like working here? Do you like your coworkers? And, and Charlie's a little, hedging on that answer. And he's like, all right, you're out.
Yeah. Do you smell a lawsuit, John? Is that what you're...
I get, like, if he's like, everyone around here hates you. But the basis is, like, you don't like other people enough. It's like, we're helping you. We got to set you free.
Yeah. Does Charlie's occupation really call for, like,
exactly
smooth social skills? Like, he's like an accountant's assistant,
Right.
He's not exactly in PR. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I guess he's just not, like, harassing the dames enough. Exactly. He's making everyone uncomfortable with his polite quietude.
Yeah. Your sexual harassment's been a little slack, Charlie.
Yeah, take a look at this chart. The numbers are down.
Yeah, exactly. And if being fired isn't enough, on the way out, the boss is like, hey, and you got to move out of your mom's house, too. Really overstepping his boundaries, I have to say, as his former boss, but whatever.
Well, now he's his friend. He can give him some advice.
Right. Next up, we meet the mother in question, who's a kind, sweet soul. She sounds like a chicken with laryngitis. She's got, like, a cartoon character voice.
Yeah, I didn't get a clip. I really should have.
Really?
But it really felt like... I don't know. I just wanted to move on fast from it, but I don't think that was just the actress being normal. Like, it just felt like such a caricature of the, like, nagging mom.
Charlie,
right.
My heart medicine. It has that kind of feel. Right. Was that okay? Not as good as my Crypt Keeper, but was that in the ballpark?
No, but in the same vein as your Crypt Keeper.
True. That's like the Crypt Keeper's mom. Charlie. She's putting the guilt screws on Charlie for getting fired and for being a general screw-up. She's not too mad at him, though, because she tucks him in for a nap, undresses him, all normal mother-son relationship stuff, and he whistles the harpsichord song. It's like a sonata as he drifts off to sleep.
Yes, as discussed in some detail in our special bonus episode.
Yes.
Your interview with, what was her name again?
Reba Wisner on the music of the Twilight Zone. We talk about this episode in depth. I guess I'll just say, I'll hold off that and just put a little pin and say, go check out that episode if you want to find out the secrets of the music for miniature.
Issues too hot for the other Twilight Zone podcast to touch.
Yeah, exactly. So in the next scene, Charlie heads back to the dollhouse at the museum. I was sort of confused by this because it seemed like he believed the guard last time.
Well, it was hard to get it out of his head.
True.
I mean, you maybe like want to believe like, oh, I must have been having a daydream, but there's a compulsion. His life is... What's he going to do with his Fred? Or Day
What's
Fred?
he going to do with his Fred?
What's he going to do with his Fred Day? He's checked Indeed.com. He's checked Monster.com.
Yeah. Checked OkCupid several times, I'm sure. We get a little scene within the dollhouse, and it wasn't just his imagination. The dolls are very much alive. And not only are they alive, they're enacting a little episode of Downton Abbey. The girl and her maid are sort of hanging out, and there's a knock on the door, and the maid opens it up, and there's like a magician there? I mean, I understand that it's a gentleman caller, but he really looks like a magician.
I thought he looked kind of like a Sacha Baron Cohen character.
Do tell.
He's like just a couple shades away from like a Borat or something.
Well, what do you mean? Like just because he's got that crazy mustache?
Yeah, I thought it looked like it was someone he could have played.
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to think of what that movie would be.
I think Sasha could be ready for a period piece.
Yeah, that's true.
A miniature period piece.
Yeah, exactly.
He can play small Fred.
Yeah. It turns out to not be a magician or Sacha Baron Cohen doing some weird high-concept miniature prank. But it's a gentleman caller within the sphere of this little dollhouse world. We then kind of get the little piece of information that not only is Charlie very interested in this dollhouse, but he kind of has a crush on the girl. Because when the magician and the girl doll head out for chocolate phosphates, Charlie seems a little bit put off by that. Then we get back to the apartment, and Charlie's family is having breakfast together, which is weird. It's Charlie's sister and her husband and the mother. So Charlie's brother-in-law is going to hook Charlie up with a job, but apparently it would entail going outside of the city to a place in the suburbs. And Charlie turns it down, ostensibly giving some vague reason about he doesn't want to commute, but we all know it's because he would be too far from the dollhouse. It's fair. It's hard to find a good job with Benny's that, doesn't have a long commute to the dollhouse that you've anthropomorphized. But
well, Mr. Money Mustache has a lot to say about a long commute.
True.
You guys should look into that. Yeah. You're wasting your lives.
We haven't gotten anyone who knows what Mr. Money Mustache is writing in. If you do, please, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I think we've had some listeners, but then they check out the website and they get busy, improving their lives, and we never hear from them.
Right, exactly. They don't have time to. If you amortize the cost of listening to our podcast over 30 years.
Totally. Exactly.
Thousands of dollars in lost time. So Charlie's getting pretty deep into the little dramas unfolding in the dollhouse. He's seeming to spend a lot of time there. He's at this point talking to the doll, so it's like a slow escalation.
My mother says that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Have I told you about my mother?
Strong opener.
Yeah. Just walk into a
bar. I believe he got that from Anthony Perkins' dating tips. Yeah. And then the game continues.
Oh, I have a sister about your age. Her name's Myra. She's nice, too. And her husband says she's very pretty. But she's not as pretty as you are. I guess you're about the prettiest girl in the whole world. I don't mind saying that because I know you can't hear me. But I think I'd say it even if you could.
So, this is another good tip.
Yeah.
If the girls aren't warming up with the mom line, just shift over to the sister bit.
You're even prettier than my sister.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Wink.
Yeah, it's a lot of weird connotations to spin off of that line.
I just imagine the doll starts talking to him and is like, "Listen here, bub." What's the gangster Caesar voice?
Oh, yeah.
Do it all the time.
Drop the Irish shanty routine. Get a clue.
Get wise.
Yeah. That guard isn't looking. Grab the sarcophagus and run. Another classic catchphrase from the Twilight Pwn. The guard comes over to interrupt Charlie talking to the doll, just to kind of ask him, kind of, WTF are you doing? I really like how Charlie kind of turns into an open carry activist. He's like, it's not technically against the law what I'm doing. You don't have the right to ask me to walk away from the dollhouse.
This was actually ripped from the headlines. There were a lot of lawsuits involving man-doll love relationships.
Yeah, it was
big. It was a time of great change.
I was about to say man-doll relationships is kind of has a different connotation in the present day.
Oh, yeah. Well, so forth.
Yeah. Charlie's mother and sister have conspired to tail him. Myra, that's Charlie's sister, follows him and finds him at the museum, sort of creepily fogging up the glass at the dollhouse exhibit. Mm-hmm. She takes him out for a cup of joe, and they have a little sibling heart-to-heart. It doesn't exactly come out that he thinks the doll is real, but it certainly comes out that he's sort of throwing his life away. This is the scene where she's like, "You're living your life the way you did when you were 14 years old," or something like that, and I was just kind of like, yeah, that sounds about right. I don't know. He said, sitting in his room with all his Star Wars toys, and it's a bit of a hipster man-child vibe to it. Myra thinks that Charlie needs a girl, so she's going to hook him up with a friend of hers from the office. So out on the date, the phrase that kept going through my mind was prelude to a restraining order. Charlie's being real creepy. And the girl doesn't really seem to mind. Kind of has the feel of an episode of Blind Date gone. Kept waiting for it to cut away to Roger Lodge.
You know, once they get in the hot tub, everything's going to work out.
That usually smooths it out, yeah. The girl seems to be kind of running her own game on Charlie, kind of her own weird, neg routine.
Boy, you sure are quiet. That means you're the dangerous type. You can't trust the quiet ones.
You can trust me.
Who says I want to?
Again, if this were a horror movie, just change the pitch a couple degrees and that would have delicious irony when she's kind of like, "Oh, you're dangerous, aren't you?" And she thinks he's this sweet, dopey guy, and then he just pulls out the knife.
Yeah, it has the kind of feel of Norman Bates hits the clubs. Like it's quite awkward.
Right.
And
It's
weird.
like, if I were going to pitch this script, it's like Hitch meets Psycho.
Eventually she moves in for the kiss, which not only doesn't seem to be that passionate, but involves her like falling on the ground somehow. They blocked that sort of weirdly, but I think it was supposed to be symbolic of he's a bad kisser. So she runs off and kind of gives him a quick pone of, you don't need a woman, you need a doctor. And he seems...
And you might want to move out of your mom's house.
Yeah, exactly. So we're back in the dollhouse for the 12th or 13th time, and the magician guy, Sacha Baron Cohen, is back. Somehow he makes the doll, Alice, that's the object of Charlie's affection, pass out, and he starts to carry her away up the stairs. And Charlie starts trying to get into the dollhouse, kind of pushing up against the glass. And eventually he smashes the glass, and that's obviously kind of crazy. And it's off to the nut house for Chuck. He starts getting some psychoanalysis from a very, very 50s psychoanalyst. Charlie's like, I really missed the doll. Have you seen her? And the psychologist is like, oh, I've seen her, all right. And then he reaches into his desk and he pulls out the doll, which he's borrowed from the museum, which struck me as kind of weird. Like, if somebody, like, develops a fixation on the Mona Lisa, will they just loan it to, like, a psychologist to help the guy get over it? So Charlie quite creepily cries on the doll and rubs it on his tear-stained face. And then we cut away, and it's a time cut. We're a few weeks later, and Charlie's supposedly cured. He comes out to his waiting family and brother-in-law, and he seems to be fine, cured of his delusion of being in love with the doll. His mom healthily tucks him into bed, 30-year-old son, just getting a little nap time. And once the doors close, Charlie kind of assumes a different expression on his face altogether, and we sense that perhaps he's not actually cured. And then we cut to the evening. Harriet arrives for her hot date with the guy. Give him more than a day, I feel like, to get out of the nut house before you start dating again. I don't know. But anyway, Charlie doesn't answer the door. They break it down, and he's missing. And we see in the museum that Charlie's pulled the old mixed-up files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler. He hid out in a sarcophagus, and he sneaks over to the dollhouse to sort of pick up the one-sided conversation. Then the family and the psychologist come gunning for him. They're calling out to him, trying to get him to see the error of his ways. They turn on the lights, and he's gone. But at this point, the guard walks over to the dollhouse, kind of peeks in while everybody else is looking at other things, and he sees nothing else but old Charlie, who is now a wooden doll, and seems quite content.
They never found Charlie Parks because the guard didn't tell them what he saw in the glass case. He knew what they'd say, and he knew they'd be right, too. Because seeing is not always believing, especially if what you see happens to be an odd corner of the Twilight Zone.
Ding.
Weirdly optimistic music for kind of such a creepy, foreboding episode, I feel.
I feel like the tone of this episode, in the way I received it, was different than the tone of this episode as the average viewer, according to the internet, receives this episode.
Yeah, how so?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that we didn't really touch on in our discussion is that Charlie is portrayed by actor Robert Duvall.
True, that's the elephant. That's the Duvall in the room.
Mm-hmm. And he does do a very nice performance, and I think a lot of people think that he gave a very compelling, like, you root for Charlie, you feel his kind of sadness or just not really fitting in with the world, and this is a nice thing that he's found a person, and it's like a nice ending that he's made his escape. And it just doesn't quite play that way to me, but I feel like I might be the odd man out not getting it like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the weird thing is that, like, he does such a good job of portraying someone who seems to essentially have a mental illness that it's like it doesn't seem like he's like a sweet naïf who kind of like escapes to a happier world. Like, he portrays disturbed too well, I feel like, for it to feel like a sweet escape. You know what I mean?
But does he play disturbed? I mean, I kind of think he does. But, like, is it supposed to read not as disturbed so much as just like out of step?
Well,
like,
that's what it's supposed
kind
to
of like
read
a more.
as. What I'm saying is he did two. The psychological realism of the
Yeah.
portrayal was like out of step with what they were going for, you know?
Right. He was like a quiet, gentle version of was it Beavis?
Yes,
You know, like you had the guy who was kind of
Mr.
just didn't
Beavis,
fit in.
yeah.
Right, Mr. Beavis didn't quite fit in. Like that was obviously big, goofy comedy. Like this is kind of a similar guy who's just like he didn't quite fit with this world, but yeah, you have a great actor doing it, and he almost takes it too far.
He really does, yeah.
He just feels like very, very out of step and very. I don't know.
I feel like you're not saying exactly what it is you thought he did do. I get that you're saying like it wasn't quite the sweet escape story that people are portraying it as. Did you feel like he just portrayed the guy too sincerely so it kind of comes across as creepy, or more that it's just kind of sad because you feel like almost this guy really is actually disturbed and this is kind of effed up?
I don't know. I didn't find it heartwarming at the end.
No, I
And
don't
when
either, yeah.
And I also, it kind of reminded me a bit of 16 millimeter Shrine.
Yeah, it's that kind of
you know,
thing,
the person has this thing that they want that they can't have, and then at the end they get it. But what does that really mean that they got it? What does it really mean that he became a little person and is, you know, walking around in the dollhouse?
Yeah, and also like,
is it like Willoughby kind of tells us what that means? Is he probably like offed himself in the museum or something? But
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that like it's odd because I think what they're going for is that Beavis thing of like, you know, someone who's a little out of step with the world, you know, finds their rightful place through magical circumstances. But the problem is, I think you kind of hit it there, is that it's like if it's too psychologically real, it just feels wrong. You know what I mean? Like it just feels
well, his rightful place is a sad place because he's the only person he's quote unquote connecting with is a woman who doesn't respond to him.
Well, up until
like,
but
isn't
she
acknowledging.
Up until like when he's a doll, she seems to interact with him. But up until that point, it's very much in his head.
Whole, like, if she were responding to him in those scenes, if she were like talking to him and like, I don't know, it'd be sillier maybe, but it's like making a love story out of what's his name in Jodie Foster or something.
Yeah,
Hinckley.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I thought it wasn't heartwarming either. I thought it was creepy. I think the psychological realism of it though is interesting on some level because it gives the episode a different tone than a lot of Twilight Zone episodes in a weird way. It's like a weird mismatch of like a goofy idea with like a serious tone. I don't know. It's interesting. Like I almost feel like if they'd done a worse job on it, the episode might have come out better altogether because it just would have been a little more lighthearted and wacky.
Yeah, timpani hit here and there might have really gone a long way.
Yeah.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Scott, Siegfried, Mark Grams Jr., Siegfried and Grams, and IMDb.
This kind of actually goes against what I just said earlier in the episode, but according to trivia, because of a lawsuit, this episode was not included in the syndication package for the Twilight Zone. It finally re-aired in 1984 as part of the Twilight Zone Silver Anniversary Special. For this showing, the dollhouse scenes were colorized in an early public demonstration of the process. Interesting, confusing.
Yeah.
But that goes against what I'd said about the fourth season not being part of the syndication package. So, as always, let's just go ahead.
I hate to tell you, but I'm afraid this time you pulled a boner.
Rare that we have the turnaround on the boner clip within the space of one episode.
It's usually not in real time.
Yeah, exactly. Grams goes into more detail on the lawsuit. Apparently someone submitted a story called The 13th Mannequin, which is weirdly kind of in a weird way similar to the Wax Museum one. It's about a guy who keeps like 12 mannequins and like kind of inhabits their world, and when he dies, like a delivery man delivers a 13th mannequin and it's of him. And he sued, actually, he kept suing. He sued the Twilight Zone like 3 times.
And you'd think like either the new exhibit or the After Hours might be a little closer than the one about this.
I think because of the timing, it couldn't have been the After Hours because he submitted it like in 1961 or something like that.
Right.
But the CBS and Twilight Zone beat the lawsuit twice. I just want to read part of Serling's defense. He wrote a letter to somebody about this issue, because it's Charles Beaumont who wrote the episode, so he's defending Chuck.
Yeah.
Knowing Mr. Beaumont's personal integrity, not to mention his own professional status, it is my educated guess that what has occurred is the very commonplace occurrence of a coincidental similarity of approach to an oft-used theme. I don't know. Just something about even in personal correspondence.
The kind of crazy calamity and mix-up that can only be found
in relation to lawsuits concerning the Twilight
filed
Zone.
against the Twilight Zone.
The people versus the Twilight Zone. Grams doesn't have too much more trivia aside from the colorized thing. I watched on YouTube kind of a so what. I think probably at the time colorization was the exciting fad, but just watching it now, it just seems stupid.
Colorization kind of came and went.
Yeah.
I think there was kind of a big pushback against it, but then I think now kids are just like, no, we're not going to watch those movies anyway.
Well, I
don't care if you fake color them or not. I'm not watching it.
The people who are going to come to a black and white movie are going to want to watch it black and white, and you know what I mean?
Right.
It's not like, oh, color, that changes everything.
Yeah. Oh, Casablanca, because it's got these weird muted colors. It looks like Transformers.
Yeah, exactly.
Revenge of the Fallen.
And we put a Marky Mark song instead of You Must Remember This.
Right. Exactly.
Or As Time Goes
All
By.
right.
Whatever it's called. Move on.
Robert Duvall played Charlie Parker. He was also in several episodes of The Outer Limits.
Oh.
So he was willing to dip his wick wherever
Hey-o.
in the sci-fi world. His breakout role was as Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird, but
He'll
he of
feature
course had
again
a
in
very
The Ghost at a Watchmen, coming to theaters next year, I'm sure.
yeah. Well, it's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
He's obviously had an extraordinarily long and varied career, possibly best remembered for his role as Tom Hagen in the first two Godfather movies, or Kilgore in Apocalypse Now. 6 Academy Award nominations all told. Quite prolific.
Yeah.
Pert Kelton played Mrs. Parks. She was the original Alice Cramden in The Honeymooners before it went to series. I guess it was originally kind of like a sketch or 15-minute kind of like interbit.
Kind of like The Simpsons on the Tracy Ullman show or something.
I think I got kind of that vibe, but a little bit longer somehow. Before it became an official show, she played the Alice Cramden role. She lost that role due to blacklisting of her husband, Ralph Bell, which affected her career. Barbara Barry played Myra. She wrote Second Act in 1997, a frank and irreverently humorous book chronicling her 30-year experience, first with irritable bowel syndrome and subsequent cancer.
Oh, God.
Now, I just liked the way IMDb wrote that, because I imagine the book is about her career, and the IBS and the cancer are an aspect of her life, but the way it's written, it makes it sound like I wrote a book and it's IBS from page 1 to the page
also
475.
called A Second Act?
Yeah,
It's
so
very
I
much a
think it has-
showbiz memoir title.
Right.
My
right.
second act was IBS.
William Wyndon played Dr. Wallman. He was the major in 5 Characters in Search of an Exit.
Oh, yeah.
Be sure to pick up his charming toy from
Yes.
Biff Bang Pow
Yeah.
soon. John McLean played the museum guard. He was also in The Midnight Sun, Uncle Simon and the Shelter. Claire Griswold played the doll, a.k.a. Alice. She was Sidney Pollack's wife, who we saw in The Trouble with Templeton as
Right.
the temperamental director. So, kind of interesting little connection. Lenny Weinrib played Buddy. He did tons of voice acting, including playing the original Scrappy-Doo and Fred Flintstone in Flintstone's Kids, and he did voices in H.R. Puff and stuff. Just tons and tons of stuff. He was the kind of buffoonish boyfriend.
Yeah, or husband, yeah.
Or brother-in-law, yeah.
Did you notice how he kept, like, cracking his knuckles and the Foley guy put in, like, the loudest sound for the knuckle crack? It was like he used
I didn't notice that consciously, but the other day I was thinking about how I don't really crack my knuckles, and I thought about, like, what if it was super loud? And I think that random thought must have come in.
Nice. It's good.
Just because of that.
Inception.
Sure, totally. Chet Stratton played the museum guide. He was also in The Mind the Matter. Sally Kellerman played an office worker. She's probably best remembered as Hot Lips Hallahan in the MASH movie. She was nominated for Oscar and Golden Globe
weirdly
for supporting
big
actress
cast.
in that role.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, 4th season.
Yeah.
She was also best remembered for me as the love interest in Back to School. Really liked that movie more than I should.
Nice.
Written by Charles Beaumont, directed by Walter Grauman. He was a distant relation of Sid Grauman, known for building Hollywood's Chinese and Egyptian movie theaters. So, all that, I think, brings us to, I don't know if I should play the clip, but...
Inevitable.
MST3K.
So we find connections between Mystery Science Theater 3000 and the Twilight Zone. Sometimes we have a good one, sometimes we get skunked, and sometimes we have something in between, which I'm guessing is this week.
I'm like 98% certain I've done this one before.
Oh, okay.
But I'll go ahead and do it again. You know, it's not exactly at the Henry Grace level.
The
Long-time
Henry
listeners
Grace
will love that
level.
joke. Yeah. Barney Phillips played Demel. He was also in several Twilight Zone episodes, The Purple Testament, Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up, and A Thing About Machines. In Mystery Science Theater, he was in an episode where they watched the movie I Was a Teenage Werewolf. I'm almost certain I've done
You're
that.
talking about
I probably would have.
the lunch counter guy from Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up?
Yeah,
Okay,
he played the helpful police officer who was
Right.
like, people bug me too, Michael Landon.
Yeah, he's got a real, like...
Go ahead with your teen slang.
He's definitely got, like, a I'm in every 50s movie type of face. Like,
He's got, that's a real 50s meaty face.
Yeah.
you know?
So what about IMDb? How do they rate this one?
They give this episode an 8.0, which is,
Above
fairly
middling.
high.
It's fairly high. Yeah.
Out of the middle. Yeah, once you get out of sevens, you're out of the Midlands
Yeah.
and you're into the, prime real estate.
So how do you feel about this one? It kind of confuses me.
I don't really like it, and I feel like I'm not trying to be contrarian, or I'm not trying to invite another and win the Skygate on to me, but I can't deny that Duvall gives a good performance, but I'm not compelled by the story. I don't know. It's like a well-crafted indie movie that just bores me or something. It's
Yeah.
like there's nothing wrong with it. I can see why other people appreciate it.
Like a
but
Nebraska type of movie.
I kind of like that, but that's not a bad comparison.
Yeah,
It's like I
a little
kind of enjoyed
drab and like makes you feel kind
Yeah.
of dingy inside and like
When I first finished watching it, I was ready to give it a worse rating,
Yeah.
maybe a 4-ish, because I really I don't know, it just didn't do a whole lot for me. But with time is healing some wounds. At this point, I feel comfortable giving it like a forgettable 5, but I feel like I'm just hedging against the onslaught that's
Don't
coming.
be afraid, John. Don't be afraid.
Um,
We don't have enough
and then
listeners to really. An onslaught
Right.
would be being slightly generous.
Right,
I fear
right.
the trickle
The
of
3
anger.
people on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. I mean, okay, I'd started talking myself into like a 5+ for Duvall giving a good performance and all that. But you know what? I'm gonna stick to my gut, and I'm gonna say that this is like a 4. It's a 4 bore.
4 bore. Nice. Nailed it.
I'm just gonna own my simplistic, childish analysis.
4 bore. 3p. 2 poo. I don't know. I don't think it's a 4 bore. It's not like a 9 feeling fine, but nor is it 7 heaven. It's like very well executed, but I just feel like the tone is confusing to me because it's like this well acted, well written, well-ish written episode that just kind of makes me feel weird. Like at the end, it's neither a happy nor a sad ending. It kind of makes me feel a little deranged and like confused. I'm like, this feels wrong and dirty and strange, and I don't. But everyone are like, but the music is telling me it's supposed to be happy, and Serling's telling me he escaped, and that's good. So it makes me feel a little bit crazy. I don't know. It's like it's above a 5 just because I think it really is well executed. And I also think like the technique, the filmmaking of it is a lot better than the average 4th season. Like they cut back and forth between like all the things at a relatively decent pace. There's no like 3-minute parking scenes. There's no like grizzled old prospector who gives someone directions for a few minutes. It stinks of a minus because the minus is like, what is this? So I guess like a 6- is how I feel about it. I feel very uncertain though. I really would actually like to hear from listeners on this. Normally I'm just lying out of my ass, but this time I really would love to hear from people, just to hear from someone who loves the episode. I just would love to hear what exactly why exactly you think it's a happy ending, and then I'd like to hear from your shrink. But that wraps it up for Miniature, which was requested by somebody.
It was requested by Anonymous on Tumblr and Benahintz on Gmail.
Thank you, Benahintz. So next week we have another request coming up. It's an episode called The Fugitive, requested by Adam on Gmail. Now, you may note that we just did someone else's request named Adam, but we think it's a different Adam because he contacted us via Tumblr. However, if either Adam is trying to pass himself off as different Adams, we expect full accountability. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
We'll shut this podcast down.
Exactly. And speaking of listeners writing in, I think we should play the boner clip for a historical second time. Hit it.
I hate to tell you, but I'm afraid this time you pulled a boner.
We had a listener named Renuka who wrote in. She pointed out that there's a character in, God, who was Gart? Gart was from Willoughby, a stop at Willoughby, and his name is Gart Williams. And then she pointed out, did you notice that in When the Sky Was Opened Up, the guy is named Major William Gart? So Serling wrote a character called Major William Gart and a character named Gart Williams, and we did not notice that.
Man. Yeah, I nearly hung up the Spurs right there.
Yeah, exactly.
I just got in the car, went straight to the bar.
Pounded 15 tequilas with 15 lumps of sugar in them.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, if we're not bringing you Gart Williams Gart, what are we bringing you?
Yeah, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
What's the point?
So thank you for writing in about that, and we'll try and be more vigilant on on Gart Watch.
We're going to take it to Def Gart 2
yeah,
now.
Exactly. But in the meantime, please write in and point out other funny, weird name coincidences. How can people do that?
People could email us at twilightpwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Twilight Pwn. You can check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com. You could listen to us on any kind of podcatcher app. And you could subscribe to us in iTunes if you're there. If you'd leave us a rating or review, we would really appreciate it. To that end, could we just say a special thanks to Harrisburg 17104, Captain Scout, and Thomas K. Dye, who all left us reviews this week. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
That's
thank
great.
you much. So for the outro, did you have like a favorite, I guess I won't say doll, action figure growing up?
Well, I don't know if I had just one. I had a lot. I mean, we kind of
Yeah.
grew up, I don't know, I'm sure everyone feels this way, or a lot of kids, but it was kind of a golden age of Saturday morning cartoons. So
Yeah.
I definitely had, and I was a spoiled little kid, so I had way too many G.I. Joes, Transformers, He-Man.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I try and think about it, I'm picturing one of my Dinobots that was a T-Rex that I really loved, but, you know, there were a lot. How about yourself?
It was platonic, though, ideally. I was the exact opposite. I kind of lived a sort of more austere childhood. I mean, my dad is German, so there you go.
Right.
And I had it.
You just had to play with your bucket of the 5 characters
Yes,
in search
right,
of an
exactly.
exit dolls.
Exactly, and not speak.
Endlessly stacking them.
Yes. No, I had like one Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figure.
Oh, I forgot about those.
Yeah,
Had tons of those.
I maybe had a couple, but I very much I didn't have a lot, so I kind of would sometimes pretend that they were G.I. Joes and sometimes pretend that they were Transformers. It was kind of sad, but kind of fun.
The only thing sadder than this episode.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll talk to you next week, John.
All right, talk to you later, Fred.
Cool. And Myra, his sister, finds him at the museum. Sorry. In my notes, I wrote, finds him at the museum next to a dollhouse. But let's move on. Let me do that again. Myra... Sorry. Why did I write that?
Well, it's implied.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Okay. So, Charlie...